Hello, I'm Dr. Creotrau, and I'm here to tell you how video games are not a banal pastime or a waste of time, but how you can learn a lot from them. Today, I will be reviewing a beautiful game, Dust, an Elysian Tail. Today, I will be reviewing Dust, an Elysian Tail, and its links with psychological skills such as visuospatial reasoning, physico-mechanical reasoning, fine motor skills, memory, and moral reasoning. I will also stop for a bit on the narrative and interpretation, as the morals behind the game's story is one of the most powerful elements we can use for reflection and argumentation, both in informal and formal settings. Dust is a single-player action role-playing game, designed by Dean Dodrell and developed by Humble Hearts. It was released for Windows in 2013, and this is the version I'm playing for this review. I will start reviewing the story and doing a brief analysis of the narrative, although I tried to keep this as simple as possible without telling anything important from the game. This part might contain spoilers. So if you want to avoid possible spoilers, I will ask you to please jump to this part of the video, and then we can continue. Here we go. You start your journey in the middle of a forest with no memory of who you are. Not long after you wake up, Ara, an Elysian talking sword, comes to you. Quickly after that, Fidget, an invat in charge of protecting the sword, comes chasing for it. Ara calls you Dust and seems to know a bit of your story, so you decide to take Ara with you and start a quest to see who you are. Fidget tags along as she is in charge of protecting the sword, and she wants it back once you don't need it anymore. You start your quest and find out that monsters have been roaming the forests, and they are attacking and killing people. So you embark on a personal quest to protect these people. Eventually, you find a village, and you are told that even though monsters will attack from time to time, the way they are attacking now is organized and should be commanded by someone. So once again, you feel your sense of justice kicking in and go looking for the commander of the creatures attacking the village, aiming to stop the attacks. After you have solved this ordeal, you return to the village and find out two things. First, that the sources of water around the village have dried, and second, that some monsters have broken through the middle of the village and are attacking people. So you go to where the monsters came from and find a child in distress, whose father is dying because the healing waters in his underground village have dried. Indeed, all the underground village is in distress because of this. So again, you go to find the source of the problem and fix it. Here you start learning that there are some things in common regarding the attacks. First, there is a person called General Gaius who is on a crusade to exterminate a certain race, the Moonbloods. Second, that some creatures are being affected, possessed by a demon, who seem to corrupt their minds and make them do bad things, even when their ultimate purpose is good. After you save the underground village and learn more about the state of things, you continue your trip, every time learning more about the land and how it has spiraled down into chaos and destruction due to General Gaius, his hatred for the Moonbloods, and his crusade to exterminate them and everyone sympathizing with them. So you continue your quest to find out who you are and to put a halt to General Gaius' plan. The narrative of the game starts a bit like the story of the anti-hero, but it progresses in the other direction. You start in a position when your goal is not to save the land, or actually, no one at all. Your mission is to find out who you are, nothing more. However, your sense of righteousness guides you to do what is correct, and protect the weak ones from what is happening in the land, transforming you into a hero. In this quest, you also have to deal with a lot of conundrums. Learning from the antagonists that they are not as bad as you think, or that they are worse than you think, or that they are just trying to fix things, just not in the right way. Although you really have no choice here as the game is very linear, it makes you reflect on your role and the reasons behind other people's acts. So in the end, although the story starts as a journey of the anti-hero, it progresses and develops as a hero story. This story is not as black and white as we have seen for instance in Zelda, but it has more gray zones. You are not the almighty paladin fighting to free the land from the ultimate evil, but instead you are a person without memory learning the truth behind evil acts while trying to find yourself. Sometimes these truths are well intended, sometimes they are, well, plainly bad. Now let's talk about game design, game mechanics, and the psychology behind them. The more games we analyze, the more concepts from psychology we learn, and the more potential we can see in video games. This game, as I can see it, taps particularly into 5 different cognitive skills: Visuospatial reasoning, physico-mechanical reasoning, fine motor skills, memory, and moral reasoning. I will make a small stop on this last one as I think it's extremely important. Visuospatial reasoning is kind of straightforward right now, as you have seen it in the previous 2 videos, and already know this skill is being tapped pretty much all the time in any visual game and if your vision is not impaired. In Dust, you can find visuospatial reasoning when going around the areas, locating different paths and reading the map in order to localize where you are, where to go, or even hidden areas. The map is also very well designed, with a simple and clean layout where you can see which areas are completed, where to find save points, merchants, or where treasures can be. Physico-mechanical reasoning is a new one. This is the reasoning about physical and mechanical systems. For example, simulating in our minds how long we can jump or which side will a specific gear rotate within a system of gears. In the real world, physico-mechanical reasoning helps us every day, from calculating the strength and direction for throwing a ball when doing some sports, to crossing the road when a car is coming. Indeed, this has been a very useful skill for our survival as a species. It helped us hunt for food using spears or calculating our odds on running away from predators. In games, physico-mechanical reasoning works a little bit different, as you are not using the real-world rules when playing the game, but instead you learn the set of physical and mechanical rules that apply in the game, sometimes even crazy or counterintuitive, and use them to your advantage. This is kind of cool when you think about it. You are actually learning a whole new set of physical rules that relate to a small universe and applying it within the same universe. All that while you play and have fun. In the game, you use physico-mechanical reasoning thanks to the jumping mechanics, the crouch dash technique, the double jump, and the dodge technique. When you use these techniques, you are calculating things such as distance of jumps, speed of a fall, reach of using a technique mid-air, and speed, sometimes against wind. And you need to master these calculations in order to succeed in your mission. You can also see it in the strategy to beat certain enemies, like this troll, which requires you to parry it at a specific time so you can stun it. For this, you have to effectively time the movement and speed of the enemy's attack and press the button just at the correct time. Believe it or not, it is a complex calculation our brain is doing there. Another skill you use are fine motor skills. Fine motor skills are your skills to make small, sharp movements, usually using your fingers or hand, in order to achieve accuracy. Something interesting is that from all the studies analyzing what video games can foster and train, fine motor skills is the most reported finding. And as you are usually playing games with a controller or a mouse that requires fine movements for accuracy, you are indeed exerting it all the time. In Dust, we can see this mostly in the fighting mechanics, where you need to combine a set of fine movements in order to attack, defend, and parry attacks so you can get an advantage in the fights. Oh, and just so you know, fine motor skills also get combined with your physico-mechanical skills within the game. The game also helps foster short-term memory. Short-term memory is the memory we have of events that took place in the near past. It is different from working memory, as it is not a type of memory you manipulate, and it is also not so quick on disappearing. But it allows you to retain and recall some information for some time. For example, when you can remember the page of a book you were reading 5 days after you have put it down. The game taps on short-term memory by showing you places you cannot reach until later in the game, where you have to acquire an ability that allows you to reach it. Take for example here. In the beginning of the game, you are presented with these vines that Dust cannot grab. Fidget tells you this is important, and that maybe you will be able to come back and figure out a way to climb that wall later. After you get the iron grip mechanic, you remember this cutscene and return to the place aiming to hunt for the treasure Fidget told you about. Finally, the game taps hardly on moral reasoning. although for this you really have to focus on the story and narrative. Moral reasoning is a big topic, and we will certainly talk about it more in the future as it is the center of many games. In short, moral reasoning is a psychological process we use in order to determine if a decision is right or wrong, based on what we think is correct and ethical and what society thinks is correct and ethical. As the story of the game revolves around a group of people killing others due to their belief that they are inferior, you are confronted with the actions of these people. Do you want to help the innocent people, or do you want to be a bystander? Or even, do you want to side with the guys that are cleansing the land from an inferior race? Although the answer sounds simple, it is not so much when you play the game. There are some problems with moral reasoning inside games, so it is not so straightforward. First, you need to be aware of the story, the different characters, their backgrounds, and the implications of their actions and decisions. Second, not all people do bad moral reasoning because they are bad people, but because in the context of games they can safely, for them and others, explore what it is to make bad moral choices. Third, some games actually favor bad moral reasoning as part of their mechanics, for instance giving advantages to people doing doubtful actions or hindering the progress of players avoiding them. Players might be tempted to make morally dubious actions in favor of a quicker game progression. Another problem is that differently from mechanics or design, fostering this reasoning is not done organically. You should actively and consciously think about the situation and their meaning for the different characters, and put yourself in their shoes in order to understand their decisions and perspectives, and guide yours. For the case of Dust, you need to be well aware of the story if you want to foster moral reasoning. Then, you need to discuss the different actors, their motives in the war, and about yourself as a centerpiece in all of this, considering also your friends and their feelings, and even those who seem not to care. I wanted to be a little more thorough in this video, so I divided the analysis of the design into 4 sections: level design, character design, graphic design, and sound. Although the general design of the game is already very good, I really like the character design, both from a graphic perspective, but also from the narrative. Regarding the level design, Dust is designed as a Metroidvania game. The Metroidvania concept comes from a blending between the games Metroid and Castlevania, which were the first ones to use this type of design. Metroidvania games are games that portray a big interconnected level. The player can explore the level at will, but access to certain parts or progression is linked to certain objects or skills the player needs to acquire. They can be obtained either by exploring different areas or by defeating bosses. Also, the game presents the player with shortcuts or teleporters, allowing them to fast travel long distances and preventing long backtracking, which is exploration. Metroidvania games also depict a tight progression between level exploration and story progression. In the case of Dust, we even have some areas that can only be accessed after talking with specific characters or to do a special quest. Something else I love from the game are the cameos. Man, I love cameos in games. In Dust, you can collect keys to open chests, which give you treasure. But you can also use the keys, 4 at a time, to open cages you find through the game. Opening a cage frees a friend and opens the Sanctuary, a place where your friends hang out and party. Amongst the cameos I found were Meat Boy from Super Meat Boy, the Hyper Ducks who transformed the Sanctuary into a disco, and our friend Gomez from Fez. Concerning the character design, I really like how it's done in this game. Each character has their own personality, and it's wonderfully reflected in their dialogues and voice acting. Also, all the characters are portrayed as different types of animals, so it is a bit fable-like. They are anthropomorphic representations of foxes, cats, or mice, which makes the characters more likable as they are super cute. The background or motifs of the characters are just correct. For the main character, it is deep, and it is not just given to you, but you have to build it with time and through living the story. This helps you bind more to their story, care more about their decisions, and actually bond with them. Also, interaction between characters show how they slowly start creating bonds. So you start also caring for them and feeling how they are becoming your friends as characters, but also as a player. In the particular case of Dust, you start feeling how his actions start influencing everyone around him. And even though some people regard him as a bad person, he still does what is correct and helps people in distress regardless of compensation or risk. He is also shown as a caring person to you, feeling bad whenever he sees someone has died and trying to help people even with the most banal tasks. Fidget is a character I particularly like. She is the omniscient sidekick, often used by game designers to facilitate immersion and bring tutorials in an organic way, just as our friend Dot did in Fez. Although in Dust we actually get two sidekicks, if you count that Ara is also helping you both with tutorials and to understand your own story and who you are. Fidget is extremely cute, but she's also extremely funny, bringing comic relief when the game gets a bit too tense or sad. But it's also showing you that even though the world is falling into chaos, hope and naivety still can save the day.
Finally, we're out of those caverns.
What's the matter? Afraid of the dark?
Ha! I laugh at the dark. Actually, I'm afraid of heights.
Wait, heights? How's that possible? You fly all the time, everywhere.
Oh, do I? I must have forgotten. Just like you must have forgotten that I can still fall at any time.
In addition, Fidget has some powers that combined with yours help you fight the hordes of enemies you are forced to face, making the fights agile and fun. If it wasn't for Fidget, your progress in the game will be painfully slow and boring. The secondary characters also have a very well-defined personality. I really like this. Their personalities are sort of cliché, which make it easy for you to relate to. Their personalities are also in synchrony with their motifs, quests, and ways to act within the game. Take for example this guy, Reed.
Not you! Listen, do you hear it? Can you hear its whispers locked within? Within the box. My box.
He lost a box and he needs to recover it. The box is cursed and it has been talking to him. He is always acting paranoid and talking about weird stuff happening around him related to the box. Another interesting character is Augustine, who seems to be always lost and oblivious of the dangers around him. However, he is always happy and attributing heroic outcomes to his pretty normal doings.
See, I just knew standing around here would pay off. That barrier couldn't take it anymore and just shattered.
The enemies are also fantastic, as they are not unidimensional. They are not just evil guys, and it is not a matter of black and white. Take for instance Fuse. He used to be a normal guy, a nice guy. However, due to what General Gaius did to him, he grew vengeful and full of hatred. The war Gaius brought to his people transformed him into the monster he is now. He is not lawful evil, he is a victim of the circumstances.
You dare speak to me of innocence when you have so casually slain a countless number of my children.
On the other side of the spectrum, we have this Wraith thing. He is the embodiment of avarice and anger that a war profiteer had. He has on his hands the blood of many innocent people he hurt by making alliances with Gaius, and this is haunting his soul even after his death. Regarding the graphics, I can describe the graphics of the game as simple and clean. The character design is very cute and detailed, we can especially see this during the cutscenes. However, the characters and enemies inside the game are rather simple, with no complex textures or light effects. I really like the way perspective works for the game. The designers used a set of layers allowing the game to feel more dynamic. For example, we have a far background that is blurred, giving the sensation of depth. But then we have a closer background that portrays decoration such as statues or moving objects such as waterfalls. Then we have the player layer, where you can also find non-killable creatures who are animated and decorate the scenery, making the environment more lively. Finally, there is a foreground layer that serves both as an immersion layer and as a difficulty addition. In this layer it will rain or snow, making your vision more difficult. The game also has a weather feature, so sometimes while you are just running through an area, it will start raining. The background light will also turn darker and your vision of enemies will be more difficult. The music designers Alex Brandon and Hyperduck Soundworks created a rather nice soundtrack for the game. Although not anything particularly breathtaking, the music is pleasant and it blends with the game in a graceful way, enhancing certain scenes. Maybe it is not the type of music you will find at a game concert, but it's certainly a soundtrack I would like to have in my gaming playlist. Just judge by yourself. In our last video, we talked about how games might contain metaphors, or different interpretations that could be read in different ways. However, this is not the case for this game. Instead of a metaphor, we are given a straightforward story of racial and political persecution of minorities. All of this lies at the core of Dust, where Gaius believes there is a race, the Warmbloods, who are better than another race, the Moonbloods, and start a quest to exterminate not only the Moonbloods, but the Warmbloods that side with the Moonbloods. Everyone that is against Gaius will perish, and he has the power and the means for his crusade to become true. The land has suffered with his hatred, innocent have perished, but this does not matter to him as long as the race he hates is exterminated. We have seen this before in our history. It was a big reason why the Second World War happened, when people believing themselves superior created a division and tried to exterminate the others that were different. We still live this. Around the world, different types of races and minorities are being profiled, outcast, alienated, and in some cases, hunted, just for their background, skin color, beliefs, or even feelings. Dust tells us a story that has happened, and that is happening, and it forces us to think about who is the good and who is the bad. It forces us to ask ourselves where we are, if we are helping the oppressed, siding with the oppressor, or standing idle doing nothing while the world around us burns. In the last video, I told you that we are all the protagonists of our own stories, and we all fight for what we believe is true. However, it doesn't mean that our beliefs or facts are correct, and we might be standing at the wrong side of the scale when the story passes the bill for our acts. It also forces us to evaluate other people's perspective. Some of the evil guys are evil due to their circumstances or history. Others don't want to be evil, but just end the suffering for everyone, while others might just be selfish, arrogant, or greedy. Whatever is the case, it shows us how life is not black and white, and that some decisions, although correct, might not be easy to make. Regarding possible issues I found with the game, I found two basic problems implementing this game in formal and informal settings. The first is the violence and the second is the story. But let's talk about that in more depth. The first problem is that the game is violent. Although the violence of the game is fictional and it does not show blood in any way, the main characters go around killing monsters with a sword and burning or electrocuting them. So depending where you are from and your take on violence, you will probably like to follow the age recommendation labels. For this game is PEGI 7 or ESRBE for everyone, 10 years plus. But at the same time, you can use this violence and other violence implicitly indicated in the game to reflect about acts of violence, justice, injustice, and means to achieve goals. The second problem I see is that the game has a lot of story. Although the dialogues have voice acting and you do not need to read in order to follow the story, it is very likely that children or teenagers going through the game will just skip the story so they can just focus on playing. The story is not a problem in itself, but if your goal is to foster a reflection, you should take into account that you will have to make a special emphasis on this. Not even the average gamer adult follows the story in games. But now, what am I learning from the game as a normal player, or as a person using it in the household, or as a teacher using it in the classroom? Well, the first thing you're learning is fine motor skills. The game forces you to use fine motor skills all the time. It requires you to play it with a controller or with a keyboard and mouse. And while you are using these things, you are always using your fine motor skills. The game challenges you to press a sequence of buttons to make combos or things like that. So in order to progress, you actually need to master these skills. While you are organically going through the game, you are fostering these skills and practicing them all the time. However, if you are, for instance, a teacher or a parent, you might want to foster them a little bit more by challenging your children or your students to make like a certain length combo. That will be actually very cool. Physico-mechanical reasoning and visuospatial reasoning are tied together in the game, and it's already being fostered by it in an organic way, so you really don't have to do anything in order to foster it more. However, if you are a parent or if you are a school teacher, you might want to do another activity, right? For example, asking the student about different jumping mechanics, different fall speeds in different games, or the game and real life. How alike are they? Another thing you could do is, for instance, to teach about gravity and ask the student how a jump will be in different circumstances with different gravities, for example. Or you can also inquire why some of the mechanics of the game cannot be done in real life, for instance, a double jump. Moral reasoning is a strength of the game. If you are a regular player and you want to inquire about that, you just go through the game and follow the story and let it touch your heart. If you are a parent or if you are a school teacher and want to use this in class for discussion, first of all, remember that you have to make very aware the students or your children that you want them to go through the story, that you don't want them to skip dialogues. With teachers, you can ask, for instance, to make a small essay or also ask some questions about the game, so you are being sure that they are actually going through the story of the game. And you might use this to discuss things such as morals on ethics and paradoxes, moral paradoxes, and racism and the current state of our world and all the problems we have now with racial profiling, for instance. So it's really a good idea to use games like these as a platform to talk about important topics. Games are also a world, and this is happening in that world, so why not taking it from there and check what is happening in our world in order to make it better. Take the game, play it, feel it, let it touch your heart, and give it to your children or your students. The game will already be fostering their skills, so it's already cool, but you can also use it as a platform to discuss our current society issues. Remember, you can help to make the world a better place. If you find my videos interesting, please leave a like or a comment, and consider subscribing to my channel for more content.